Let's have some fun. Welcome to On the Clock, our first round mock draft. We are about a week away from the Eagles. With their first round pick being number 22, they also have number 50 and 53 in the second round. No third round picks this year, but we're going to dissect this first round and be interesting to see what our experts decide if the Eagles trade up, trade back, or what have you. But let's introduce the principals from the Eagle Eye podcast, Mr. Dave Zangaro and Reuben Frank. Check out their work on NBC Sports Philadelphia.com. And from Birds Huddle and Eagles pre and post game live, Barrett Brooks in the house per usual. And a big introduction and welcome to our guy, Mike Mulhern. He's responsible for a lot of what you see content-wise concerning the Eagles on Birds Huddle and on Eagles pre- and post-game live. Big, great football mind, as well as many other sports. I say often he needs his own radio show, but Mike Mulhern, our Eagles pre- and post-game live producer, as well as Birds Huddle producer. Glad to have you here. Interested to see your picks and selections, but let's dive into this because I think the first pick, as usual, is pretty much a foregone conclusion. But Dave Zangaro, we will put you on the clock. You are representing the Chicago Bears. Who do they pick with the number one overall selection?
Yeah, I don't know. This is a tough one, Danny. I think I'm going to take my fully allotted time here and really think through the possibilities for the Bears at number one. No, I mean, it's Caleb Williams. He's their pick from USC. We picked our names out of a hat to see who went first in this draft. And I thought at first that I got the best pick because I was first, but no, this is the least fun one of all of them. We all know what the Bears are going to do. They're going to get their franchise quarterback. They moved on from Justin Fields already, so they're going to go get Caleb Williams, and he's not a perfect prospect. Those don't really exist, but he is the best quarterback prospect in this year's draft. There's a lot to like about him. There are some question marks. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he has elite tools. On schedule and off schedule, he makes a lot of plays, and they're going to reset in Chicago. They're going to build their team around Caleb Williams, a quarterback from USC.
Enough confidence that the Bears will finally get this right, picking a quarterback in the first round.
With their track record, you never really know, but I think this is as sure a thing as they've gotten. And look, I really like Justin Fields. I think you can build a winner around that quarterback, but they had a really tough decision to make this offseason, and with the potential to get a prospect like Williams, you understand why they move on. And they did the right thing. They traded away Justin Fields. You can't have him on the roster when you're about to draft a new quarterback. So it's going to be the Caleb Williams show. He's a big personality too. I mean, that's another aspect of this. He has the personality of a franchise quarterback, and as long as the play backs that, everyone's going to be fine with it. Look, I don't think he's a can't miss type of player, but really a lot to like about him.
The Washington Commanders are on the clock with the second pick. They need a quarterback as well. Curious where you go here with their selection, Mr. Reuben Frank.
Yeah, and just to put this in context, the last 5 first-round quarterbacks Washington has taken, Heath Shuler, Pat Ramsey, Jason Campbell, RG3, and Dwayne Haskins won a total of 51 games in a Washington uniform, 51 and 86. RG3 had the great rookie year, but that was about it. The last quarterback Washington drafted in the first round that had a winning record in his Washington career was Sammy Baugh. He was a first-round pick in 1937, back when I started covering football. So, look, they're just going to keep trying. They really have to. And I think the one thing that the top few teams in this draft have in common is they got rid of their quarterback during the offseason, and they're starting from scratch. And certainly Washington, it was Sam Howell, who did some good things, but I don't think anyone ever really saw him as a franchise guy. So you go Jayden Daniels, the LSU kid. He's one of these guys who really blossomed. He started at Arizona State and kind of had an up and down spell in Tempe, and then goes to LSU, and just the numbers are off the charts. Heisman Trophy winner. This past year, over 1,000 rushing yards, over almost 4,000 passing yards, 40 touchdowns, completed 70% of his passes. And he's a skinny guy. He's like 6'3", 185. So, you have concerns about a quarterback who's got that kind of frame. But, I mean, he's got all the tools in the world. And certainly if Washington's ever going to hit on another first-round quarterback, this kid's going to give him a great chance at it.
Will there be three quarterbacks taken with the top three picks? Curious to know where Barrett Brooks goes with the New England Patriots selection. They are number 3 here. They're on the clock, Barrett. What are you thinking?
Well, you look at it, they got to go quarterback. They weren't happy with the way their quarterback situation has been the last 2 years. And, you know, at this point, you got to go with a guy that I really think is probably the number one quarterback in my eyes when I broke down the film. He was the number one quarterback. 6'4", 225 pounds, has all the, intangibles as far as being a prototypical quarterback size. He can run. He ran a 4.6 40 at the combine. He played baseball at Florida. He's one of those guys, great athlete. So I know everybody's kind of gun shy of dealing with, dealing with North Carolina quarterbacks, but I think he's a slam dunk. His potential to come in and be the starting quarterback is there, and I truly believe he can be a big-time quarterback in this league. So, Washington's trying to rebuild right now, new coaching staff and everything, and why wouldn't you go out there and get what I feel is the best quarterback in this draft class? So, we'll see. After 3 years, we'll evaluate who's best out of this draft class, but I think he's really, really what you want from a guy. He needs to work on his ball placement a little bit, but as far as knowing who he needs to go to, he is that guy.
I feel like you said everything but Drake Maye's name. I had to discern from the clues.
My fault. Drake Maye. Yes, Drake Maye.
There you go. What an athlete, like you said, a very versatile. And it's so difficult to be at the top of the draft at this point and miss on a pick. So, like you said, we'll reevaluate in 3 years. Number 4, welcome in the new guy, Mr. Mike Mulhern. And Mulls, Arizona Cardinals, very interesting situation. They had a great receiver there and don't have him anymore in DeAndre Hopkins. But what do you think they do here to give some weapons to Kyler Murray and the Cardinals?
Thank you, Commissioner Pommells. They are going to look to your alma mater, your high school, St. Joe's Prep, and they're going to select Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver from Ohio State, two-time All-American, 6'4", 205 pounds, has all the tools. I think, there's some talk now that maybe Malik Nabers could potentially go ahead of him. I think Marv Jr. is a slam dunk here at wide receiver number 1. Plays very similarly to his father, who's a Hall of Famer, except he's 4 inches taller. It's like a freakish combination. I do think the Cardinals here could be a trade-back candidate. Last year, you saw the video of Monty Ossenfort working the phones. Their GM dropped down from 3 to 12, then back up to 6. They picked up an extra first-rounder and ended up with Paris Johnson, offensive tackle from Ohio State. But if they stick and pick here, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the guy. I also think if they move down like they do there, maybe to 11 with Minnesota, who comes up for a quarterback, they could then move their way back in for one of these top receivers. They have, 6 picks in the top 90, 4 in the top 104. They have 2 first-rounders. They have a ton of ammo to move around the draft board if they need to. And I really think this is a bit of a sleeper team. I know late in the year, I kind of thought they were coming on a little bit. We saw what they did to the Eagles at the link once Kyler Murray came back. If they can get him an elite weapon, I think they can kind of take off a little bit here. The roster is not great, but I kind of believe in Kyler. And if you get him a guy the caliber of Marvin Harrison Jr., I think that team can maybe even contend for one of those wild card spots now that 7 teams make the playoffs.
Real quick, Mike, are you bothered at all by how Marvin Harrison Jr. shut it down after the season? No combine, no workouts, no nothing.
No, I mean, you say stand on the tape. That's what he's doing. Hey, I've had 2 straight years of 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns. What more can I do? He played alongside Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith and Jigba, all first-round picks, and he's the best of the bunch. I don't see why he needed to work out. It's crazy that, he's kind of the first guy that really hasn't, aside from guys who were injured. He chose not to, but I think the tape speaks for itself. I don't think there's any way he's getting out of the top 5, top 6, and I have him going 4 here to the Cardinals.
Yeah, you probably damage your draft stock more with the way that he performed when the whistle and the clock was running. Let's go to number 5. Interesting choice here with the Los Angeles Chargers, Dave Zangaro. What do you think they do here to try to contend once again for that NFL championship?
Yeah, first off, I agree with Mike that at 4, the Cardinals might trade out, and that if they trade out, it's because someone's going up to get a quarterback. So there's a really good chance the Chargers have their pick of all the non-quarterbacks on the board. So maybe they get Marvin Harrison Jr. But even if that doesn't happen, Malik Nabers, like Mike mentioned, some people have him above Marvin Harrison Jr. We talked about Jayden Daniels getting picked second overall. Nabers is a big reason why he was so good last year for LSU. Just a really special athlete. Not the biggest guy in the world, like 6 foot, 200 pounds, but lightning quick. Had a huge season in 2023, which followed a really big season in 2022. And the Chargers just need weapons. You know, they lost Mike Williams in free agency. Keenan Allen was traded away. So their top receivers right now are Josh Palmer and Quinton Johnston. And when you have a quarterback the caliber of Justin Herbert and you don't put weapons around him, it's really franchise malpractice. You can't do it. You have to replenish for Justin Herbert. And Nabers is a really good option. And I think this is just the beginning of this wide receiver run here.
To Bayou Bengals going in the top 5 as Malik Nabers goes to the Los Angeles Chargers. What do the Giants do with number 6, Rube, as it's kind of like the NFC East is running away from them a little bit?
Yeah, I think Dave just mentioned the run on wide receivers, and I'm going to keep that going with Washington's Rome Odunze. Really interesting guy. His dad was a history buff, and this is crazy. His dad loved Roman history, and he named him Rome. And the kid has been over to Rome. He's gone exploring there. He's a history buff in his own right. That's not why you draft him, but it's a pretty interesting story. Really came into his own last year. He was a good player, spent 5 years in Washington, but had 10 100-yard games last year, and the production was so consistent. I love that about him. He averaged almost 18 yards a catch, and against really good teams, he was very good. He only had one game all year under 80 yards, and that was a game at Arizona. So the kid is consistent. He's got really good size. He can run, and you love the consistency about him. And when you look at the Giants, I mean, they're really, unless they do something creative here, they're going to go with Daniel Jones again. They lost Saquon. They need weapons for this quarterback who's kind of, probably with his last chance. So this is a kid who, you think about the Eagles-Giants matchups and the Eagles quarterback situation, which right now you have, they're claiming James Bradbury is a part of the team moving forward. If that happens, you certainly worry about him covering a kid like this. But the Giants need weapons, and I think when Harrison and when Harrison and Nabers are gone, he's the next best weapon. So I think the Giants go wide receiver. Look, they need a lot of different things, but I think at this spot, that makes the most sense for him.
That would surely make Danny Dimes happy. But when we move on to number 7, we have had 6 offensive players selected so far. Will the trend continue with the Tennessee Titans? Barrett Brooks, what are you thinking they do there?
Yes, it will continue with another offensive guy, but we're going in the trenches. We're going what I think is the best offensive lineman in the draft. It was between Joe Alt and this guy here, Taliese Fuaga, offensive tackle from Oregon State. Great size at 6'5", 324 pounds. But what makes him a really good player is he's just a nasty, want to dog you out type of offensive lineman. He's a road grader. I love the way he goes, comes off the balls, he's explosive, gets his hand on you, and he wants to bury you every single play. And that's what makes him so appetizing as a franchise, like the Titans that like to run the ball, they like to go out and do things. And yes, he's a road grader. He ran the ball a lot. And that's what he specializes in, but he also has never given up a sack in his college career. So, put that on your list also. He has never gave a sack up for the last 2 years. So, yes, you have an offensive lineman who can pass block and run block, but that nasty disposition that he has just makes him all better because he wants to make sure he bullies who's ever in front of him. So you can put him in guard, you can keep it tackled. His feet are swift enough that he can handle guys on the edge. I think it's a perfect fit for this Titans team. For wherever they're going to put him, whether they put him at guard or they put him at tackle, he's going to be one of those guys that you're going to be reading about a lot, with that nasty attitude and his ability to go out there and the strength that he has from coming off the ball and playing with that physical strength. He has all the intangibles. He is one of the best offensive linemen in this draft.
The top offensive lineman on Barrett's board is off of it, And we move on to the 8th pick for the Atlanta Falcons. Interesting situation here. They're back here picking at the top of the draft. Mike Mulhern, Bijan Robinson is in tow. But what do they do here with the 8th pick as they're on the clock?
Yeah, it's crazy. The last 3 drafts, they've picked 4th, 8th, and 8th, and they've gone skill guy each year. Not really the way teams like to build this day and age. And when Kyle Pitts, 4th overall a couple years ago, then Drake London, and then Bijan Robinson, as you mentioned. I think there's a chance maybe they could go skill guy here if one of those 3 receivers falls, but I'm going with Dallas Turner, the edge rusher out of Alabama. Unsure if his dad is a Dallas history buff, and that's why he named him that. But this guy can play 6'3", 247. Ran a 4.46 at the combine.
Ooh.
And had a 40.5-inch vertical. Like, just a freak of nature. Was a 5-star athlete coming out of high school. First team All-American, starter for Nick Saban pretty much from day one. This team's in desperate need of pass rush, and they're kind of in a weird mode. They got a new coach in Raheem Morris, but they kind of have a bit of a win-now roster. They just paid Kirk Cousins a ton of money. So I could see them kind of going for it a little bit here. I think Turner can be a guy who can be an immediate impact player, but also, a long-term building block for them. And one name on their roster to kind of keep an eye on that I've kind of been looking at is A.J. Terrell, their cornerback. He's going into the 5th-year option, was a first-round pick in 2020. If the Eagles were to maybe swing a draft day trade, they did a couple years ago for A.J. Brown, who was in a similar situation. Maybe think about the name A.J. Terrell. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Was a second-team All-Pro a couple years ago. Maybe contract talks don't work out. Someone to keep an eye on. But as far as this pick goes, I like Dallas Turner, the edge rusher from Alabama, for the Falcons.
Love the insight there, Moles, because Eagles always looking for value, and they have 2 second-round picks, and they could maybe couple that with that 22 overall and move up in the draft. We have our first defensive player off the board to the Atlanta Falcons, according to Mike Mulhern. At number 9, the Chicago Bears are picking twice in the top 10. Once again, you got to get these picks right if you're trying to get over the hump and pay off the value and the free agency that they've spent on Keenan Allen and DeAndre Swift. But what do you think they do here, Dave?
This is an interesting one because I think part of the Bears would like one of those top 3 receivers to be there at 9. That would be a nice pick. And Dallas Turner would be a really fun pick for them at 9. But all of them are gone. So they're going to be hoping after they draft Caleb Williams that 3 other quarterbacks go. But if that doesn't happen, I think Jared Verse, the edge player from Florida State, is a good option. And I know that some opinions are split on him a little bit. And overall, this isn't the best defensive draft, but I like the kid. I know he's a little older. He's 23. He transferred from Albany earlier in his college career, but he was productive at Florida State. To me, he's the second best edge rusher in this draft. And you have Montez Sweat on the other side. It's a really nice idea to have bookends on that on that defensive line because it's a position that really is so important. You're right, Danny. I mean, they can't afford to miss on these picks. Their window could be open immediately if the quarterback is everything they think he is. So Jared Verse to me is a guy who can come in and contribute immediately, and he better. Being 23 in this draft class, a lot of times teams will kind of skew to the younger edge rushers, figuring they have kind of a bigger upside. But I think Verse still does have some upside, and I think he's a kind of guy who can come in on day one and be productive, and I think they're going to need that.
Let's move on to our 10th selection. Mr. Reuben Frank, you were on the clock representing the New York Jets. Very interesting situation. Curious what you decide here, whether it will be offense or defense. But here we are in our 10th selection, and we're looking to see how this pans out. What are you thinking there, Rube?
Yeah, and getting back to Dave's pick, I would love to see some of that film of Jared Verse at Albany, of all places. How does a talent like that, nothing against that Albany, it's a great program, but he must have been a man among boys playing up there at Albany. In any case, at number 10, I was looking at the Jets offense. They've gone 8 straight years. This is crazy. They've been a bottom 10 offense, so ranked 23rd or worse for 8 consecutive years. I mean, they haven't been in the top 20. So they've got work to do at a lot of places. They were 31st in offense last year. They averaged under 16 points a game. The thing I like about Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia, and I guess you don't even think of him as a tight end. You think of him as a weapon. And look, the results of first-round tight ends have been mixed. It's not a position that has yielded great production. Kyle Pitts had a really good rookie year. He's been up and down since then. TJ Hawkinson has been pretty good. Eric Ebron was just okay. Corey Davis, not a lot there for the 5th pick. Vernon Davis, it's been almost 20 years now since he was a 6th pick for the 49ers. So you don't get a lot of tight ends in the top 10. And a lot of the ones who've been taken that high have not really panned out, have not been worth it. But I just think Bowers is different. He's such an athlete. The production is unbelievable. He's got incredible hands. You're talking about a guy who averaged, these are wide receiver numbers. He averaged 15 yards a catch over the last 2 years, had 2,500 yards, 26 touchdowns for Georgia, and also averaged over 10 yards per rushing attempt. So great hands, great speed. He's not a crushing blocker, but he's a willing blocker. He'll help out in the run game. He's not an elite blocker, but he's a really, really dangerous player who can add some juice to a Jets offense that really desperately needs it.
Picking directly after the Jets are the Minnesota Vikings. What do you think they will do, Barrett? A few ways they can go, but what's their selection here with number 11?
I think they go quarterback, and they're going to go with a national champion. They won the last national champion in Michigan. They're going to go with J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy, I'm going to tell you the truth. Looking at his film, great ball placement, great size. He has pretty good size at 6'2", 220. But I'll tell you the truth. Harbaugh talked me into it. He talked me into this guy being a great quarterback, a fundamentally sound quarterback. He played in a NFL system with Harbaugh being there. These guys just won a national championship, so he led that team. And, his presence in the pocket, his presence in the locker room, his presence in the huddle is one that he understands what it is to be successful. So, yeah, I'm going to go with J.J. McCarthy, Michigan quarterback, really good at really getting those guys and maximizing the potential of his wide receivers on the outside, arms strong enough to place the ball in tight, windows. And, he led this team to a national championship. So I'm going to go J.J. McCarthy. He shot up through the draft. He shot up during these workouts. And I think he's at a point now where we have to consider him a guy that can lead a team in the NFL. So the Vikings go out there and get them a quarterback since, the exodus of their guy.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins now in Atlanta. Was this a personal conversation you and Jim Harbaugh had, or what?
I actually played with Jim, and people don't understand. Okay. Jim played 1 year in Detroit. He was there for about 3 months. And I can remember they were like, no, he never played there because they never wrote it down because he didn't play in a game. He didn't make the active roster. But I saw him at the Combine like years later, and he was like, I said, hey, Jim, remember we played together? He said, that's right, Barrett. We did play together in Detroit. I was there for a cup of coffee. I'm like, I told you guys, that's my guy. That's my guy.
The football world, man, is so small. That is Barrett, the king of stories, if you guys didn't know. But let's move on to number 12. The Denver Broncos are on the clock. What do they do here, Mike Mulhern?
Well, over the last 2 picks, Reuben and Barrett really took my guys here. I was looking at Brock Bowers for them or maybe J.J. McCarthy. This is obviously a quarterback-needy team. I don't think Sean Payton really wants to go into a season with Jarrett Stidham as a starting quarterback. But with the top 4 quarterbacks gone, and then Brock Bowers, I think, would have been a good fit for them. They go for Quinyon Mitchell, the cornerback from Toledo. Small school guy, a little older. He's going to be 23 years old come next season. But the production was there, and the thing that really has sold everybody on him is the performance at the Senior Bowl. He went down to Mobile and was just a dominant force, arguably the best guy on the field down there. 6 feet tall, 195 pounds. And then he went out and clocked a 4.33 in the 40 at the Combine. Just ridiculous performance. Has 6 career interceptions, 5 last year. Tough physical player. Reminds me a little like the Sauce Gardner, Devin Witherspoon type. I love that kind of player, a corner who wants to be in your face. You put him with Patrick Surtain, you get the best corner duo in the NFL. And Eagles fans, I think you can relax. I don't think Surtain's going anywhere. I know everybody likes to, call up talk radio and throw that out there. I don't think they're giving away a guy who was a first-round pick just a couple years ago with 2 years left on his deal. I say they pair him here with Quinyon Mitchell and have, the best corner duo in the NFL for the foreseeable future.
Just our 3rd defensive player off the board in the first 12 picks. But at 13, the Las Vegas Raiders are on the clock. Dave Zangaro. Will this be a defensive player?
It will not be. And Mike, I'm mad at you for taking Quinyon Mitchell because, gosh, I love
Yeah,
that
that's your
player.
guy.
He's been my guy for a long time, and he slowly floated his way away from the Eagles' territory. But no, the Raiders, they come into this. They could use a quarterback, right? Like they certainly, probably, ideally, don't want to have Gardner Minshew be their starter. He's certainly not the long term answer there. But the top three quarterbacks are gone. Probably too early for Bo Nix. So don't overthink this. Whoever your quarterback is, they're going to need protection. And to me, the best offensive tackle in this draft is still available. The Raiders are probably a little surprised to see Fuaga go at 7. So they'll sit back at 13 and take Joe Alt from Notre Dame. Just a huge dude, 6'8, 320, just very steady. And the one reason he might slide a little bit in this draft is he's not like a next level freakish athlete. He isn't. I mean, there are some guys in this class that are, and if that's what you're attracted to, then yeah, those players are out there for you. But if you want a guy who's just going to be as steady as they come, it's Joe Alt. And I know the positional line, like the positions don't really line up here. They have Colton Miller already as their left tackle, so there are right tackle first guys in this draft. But take the best player, and Joe Alt's the best player here. If you have to cross-train him and teach him how to play right tackle, you do it, and you have faith that he's going to be able to figure it out. And look, I think there were other players who might fit, but the best value here is Alt, and I think he'd be the wisest pick.
A baker's dozen of selections in the book. The Big Easy is where we are next. New Orleans Saints on the clock at number 14, Reuben Frank. What do you think they do here?
Yeah, and I think you're going to really see this is such a deep draft for offensive linemen, offensive tackles, really. And I think you're going to see a bunch of them here in the middle of this first round. The Saints have some issues at O tackle. Trevor Penning, a former first round pick, got benched last year. Ryan Ramczyk has those knee issues, chronic knee issues, and no, they don't even know if he's going to play again. So I'm going O tackle here with Olu Fashanu from Penn State. He's just a powerful guy with great technique. It's interesting. He's a 4-year player, but he's only 20. So you're getting, Dave talked about how teams really want young guys who have a huge ceiling, a chance. And he'll be 20 for most of his rookie year as well. So he's a guy who has a huge ceiling, but is already a really polished NFL-ready player who can go down to New Orleans and make an impact from the jump. Doesn't have like the huge bulk you might see in a lot of guys, but he's kind of got a narrower frame, but he's a powerful kid and technically a lot sounder than you see from a lot of young kids 20 years old coming out. So Saints really, look, you talk about best available player over a position in need, but the Saints don't have tackles. So in a draft like this where there's a few really, really plug and play solid guys, I don't think they have a choice but to go tackle at number 14.
We go to the AFC now. The Indianapolis Colts are picking at number 15. Barrett, what do you think they do with this selection?
I think they get probably the best cornerback in this draft as far as potential and how he's a player. I'm going to go Terrion Arnold. Terrion Arnold is probably, skill set, play for play, one of the better quarterbacks in this draft. I mean, he's great feet. He's able to go out. The only thing that kept him from being the first corner, the best corner in this draft, that he ran a 4.5. And Quinyon definitely helped himself at running a 4.3. But, you talk about Terrion Arnold. I love how he has fluid hips. He has quick twitch. He can play man-to-man. He can play in zone, play at various different defenses while at Alabama. And I really think that Terrion Arnold will come in and push for a starting job there with the Colts. He's talented enough to go out there. He has a lot of confidence, lacks nothing as far as confidence, but also has the athleticism to go out there and cover big-time receivers. So I'm going to go with Terrion Arnold, cornerback from Alabama. He can come in and help this Colts defense.
Bit of a changing of the guard in Seattle, who picked 16th, Mike Mulhern. What do you think they do here, and will it be a change in draft philosophy at all?
Well, they still have the same GM and John Schneider. He's a guy who does like to move down often, so I'll get to that in a moment because I think this is a spot where the Eagles could conceivably move up. But I have them sticking and picking right here and taking Troy Fautanu, offensive lineman from Washington, just an elite mover. You saw the clip, if you haven't, of Jeff Stoutland at the combine. He was running the offensive line drills, and he just seemed totally enamored with this guy. He's 6'4", 317 pounds. A little on the older side. He'll be 24 come the start of next season. You juxtapose that with Jordan Mailata, who just signed a third contract, and he's just turned 27. So he's a little older for a prospect, but ran just a hair over 5 seconds in the 40, 32.5 inch in the vertical jump. And he offers that positional versatility. He's played guard. He's played tackle. He played left tackle at Washington. They had left-handed quarterback Michael Penix, so he's really like the front side blocker there. Did a great job, locking things down there. And as I said, I think this is really a spot where the Eagles could look to move up. The Seahawks do not have a second-round pick. They traded that last year for Leonard Williams. The Eagles have 2. I could see a potential deal working out there. This is a guy who could slot right in at guard right away for the Eagles and then slide out to tackle once Lane Johnson retires. It would probably cost you pick 50 or 53. Maybe you can get a 4th or 5th round pick back from the Seahawks. But I think this is a guy that would make sense for the Seahawks. He also, their new offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, was the OC at Washington last year. So he's coached Fautanu before. I think that'd be a good fit for them. But this is certainly a spot where I think the Eagles and Howie Roseman, that phone finger would start to get a little itchy, starting to press some buttons, trying to call up some GMs.
All the way from Washington, we go to the Sunshine State, where the AFC South, always an interesting division. The Jacksonville Jaguars pick 17th. Dave, what do you think their selection will be here?
Well, we watched the Houston Texans kind of load up at the skill positions, right? Bring Doug a skill guy, and it's Brian Thomas Jr. here. I must just like the LSU receivers because this is the second one I've drafted. I gave Malik Nabers to the Chargers at 5, but if I have to be on any hill, I'll be on the hill with LSU wide receivers. Those guys are pretty good. And Thomas, to me, the top 3 receivers in this draft are kind of on their own. But to me, Thomas is closer to them than he is to the rest of the pack. I think he is going to make it higher in this draft than some people might think. He's kind of a freakish dude. He's 6'3", 209, and ran a 4.33. Like, that alone is enough to get drafted in the top 20. And he was super productive at LSU too. He had 17 touchdowns catching the ball from Jayden Daniels last year. So I like the idea of the Jaguars kind of loading up at the skill position here a little bit more. They have Gabe Davis. They got him in the offseason. Christian Kirk is still there. But as long as you have Trevor Lawrence, I think it makes sense to get him as much offensive firepower as possible. We know Doug Peterson will be on board with this pick as well. So for a lot of reasons, I like Brian Thomas to the Jags. And I know some people are thinking, well, maybe, in a high-powered offense, Malik Nabers got so much of the shine that it allowed him to do things that he won't be able to do elsewhere. But the last 2 times LSU has had a tandem like this, it's worked out really well for both players. You had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Both have been pretty good in the league. You had Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. Both of them have been pretty good. So I don't think it's a stretch to think that Nabers and Brian Thomas will end up having really good NFL careers. And like Mike mentioned, we're in trade-up territory for Howie. Like, once you get past 15, I think this is the range where all these players we're listing, keep an open mind, because Howie could make a move up and get in that range.
From the Bayou Bengals to the Cincinnati version of the Bengals, Reuben Frank, what do you think at 18 the Cincinnati team is thinking?
Well, I'm still trying to wrap my arms around Dave saying Justin Jefferson's pretty good.
Yeah. And Jamar Chase and Odell Beckham.
Might not be the exact way I describe it, but yeah. And again, I think 18 makes a lot. We don't do trades in this draft, but 18, I have the Bengals taking the Alabama offensive tackle J.C. Latham. I could really see Howie getting up to 18 as well. I think 16, 17, I think that's the range. I think above 16 might be a little too much, although I wouldn't rule it out. I still think a trade down is possible, but I think if I had to guess what's most likely for Howie to do if he doesn't pick at 22, it's to go to 18 and take Latham, who's another guy who could come in and play guard from the get-go and swing out to tackle. Eventually, he kind of looks like a guard. He's a huge dude. but really a tremendous prospect as a tackle as well. So he's an interesting guy. If we were allowed to do trades, I'd have the Eagles going up to 18 and taking J.C. Latham, but I'm going to give him to the Bengals here, just because we're not allowed to do trades.
Let's move to 19. The Los Angeles Rams are picking their Barrett Brooks. What are your thoughts?
Well, I know one team that's not going to trade right now, and that's because that's the Rams, because they just lost probably the best defensive player of the last decade in Aaron Donald, and they need to bring somebody in to replace him. And his replacement is Jer'Zhan Newton, defensive tackle out of Illinois. They call him Johnny Newton. That's his nickname, Johnny. So Johnny is a big-time player. He was Defensive Player of the Year in the Big Ten, all Big Ten selection, created havoc. He's a grown man playing in the middle of that Illinois defense. He's got a rip move and get up the field that, most guys can't stop once he gets on the edge. He's strong enough to hold the point and run plays. And he just really beat a lot of bigger competition, bigger players that you would think would kind of maul him a little bit. Because he's not that big. He's 6'1", 305. But he plays a lot stronger than that. And his jump off the ball it is amazing. So, yes, he's the guy to come in and at least try to give him some of what Aaron Donald left there, for him to go in and be his replacement. The sky's the limit for this kid. He has a high ceiling, and he has a motor on him too. And I love his swagger. He believes that he is a great player, and I think he's going to go out there and try to be that great player and try to ease the pain of losing the best defensive player of the last 10 years.
19 picks, only 5 defensive players selected among them. Tells you where our experts think things are trending with football. But the Pittsburgh Steelers pick 20th, Mike Mulhern. Is this defense or offense?
Well, the steel curtain's a little bit in the rear view. We're going offense here, Danny. We're going with Graham Barton, offensive lineman from Duke. I don't know what's happened to the Steelers drafting recently. Over the past few years, they went Terrell Edmunds, who was here with the Eagles for part of a season, struggled. They traded 2 first-rounders to go up and get Devin Bush. He's no longer on the team. They just traded the Eagles Kenny Pickett. So they used to be like, one of the darlings of the draft every year. I'd be like, who's this tough guy they're taking that's going to be awesome? I'd be like, why couldn't the Eagles get a guy like this? But lately, that hasn't been the case. But they've kind of gotten back to their principles. They took Broderick Jones last year, an offensive lineman from Georgia, try to refortify that trench. Grab Graham Barton, a guy who's played center and played tackle, kind of projects more as a center. And the Steelers in their history have had some elite centers and some great swing tackles / backup guards like Barrett Brooks. But the center position has always been awesome. Mike Webster, Dermontti Dawson, Jeff Hardings, Marquise Pouncey. They've always had great centers, and they've had great teams when they've had that. So I say they go center here and take Graham Barton out of Duke.
I'll tell you what happened to their drafting. Kevin Colbert retired.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
Let's see what the Miami Dolphins are doing with pick 21, Dave Zangaro. They are a team probably on the cusp of really breaking out, and obviously the offense is prolific, but what do you think they do here?
There are options for the Dolphins and different positional options. I went with Latu, the edge rusher from UCLA, and he's a tricky player to pinpoint where he's going to go in this draft, and it has nothing to do with his talent. People probably know his story. He once medically retired while at Washington with a neck injury, and he's been back and he's been playing so well for UCLA. It really depends on where your medical staff falls on him. If they give you the green light to draft a player like Latu, you go ahead and draft him. He's a really good player. And you look at the Dolphins, they could use help in their front. Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, they have both of them, but they're both coming off season-ending injuries. Jalen Phillips was an Achilles and Bradley Chubb was an ACL. So maybe it's a little redundant to keep adding to the edge, but you can play all these guys, and there's no guarantee that any of them are going to be healthy. So I like the idea of adding Latu, who kind of does remind you of Jalen Phillips a little bit, a player who I've really liked for a long time. You can keep adding guys on the edge, and I think Latu gets drafted way later than he would if he didn't have that medical concern. I think we're talking about a top 15 pick if that issue doesn't exist. So it comes down to whether or not you get the green light. If the Dolphins get the green light, this would be a really good value pick for them.
11 picks left to go. No trading up, no trading back. Number 22 goes to the Eagles. And Reuben Frank, you are the Birds brass. Where does it go here?
Pressure, pressure, pressure.
Yeah, and for me, it came down to a corner or an offensive lineman. And I think, I mean, gosh, I don't know what the number would be, but I think the odds are pretty great that the Eagles are going to come out of this first round with one or the other. At 22, considering the O linemen who've gone, if I was picking an O lineman here, it'd be Amarius Mims from Georgia. They don't really take Georgia guys, so I'm going to stay away from. I'm going to stay away from that. What I'm going to do here is, there's a lot of discussion about who the third best corner is in this draft, and I think everybody's pretty much in agreement that Quinyon Mitchell is the best of the bunch, and Terrion Arnold is the second best. In one order or the other, Nate Wiggins, the Clemson kid, is a really intriguing player for me, and he's the pick. He's the Eagles' pick here. I think he is the third best corner in the draft. There are some questions about him. He's not he's not going to give you anything against the run. Look, he's the big knock on him is that he's an elite cover guy, but he's a real liability. Teams, the Eagles certainly value the ability to play the run from all 11 guys on the field. But he's such a good pass defender. He's polished. He's got great range. He's sticky, and I love his attitude. I love his swagger. Look, Slay's 33. Bradbury is 30, 31. I still don't believe Bradbury's going to even be here. The Eagles do have some corners, and Isaiah Rodgers is a guy who we expect to be cleared any day now. He hasn't yet. Keely Ringo did some good things last year. So there's some guys. Eli Ricks, as an undrafted rookie, had some moments. But look, this team has not drafted a corner in the first round since Lito Shepherd 22 years ago out of Florida. So I think it's time. I think Wiggins is a guy you can play right from the get-go. I think you can, I think he's a physical player, so I don't think he's shying away. I just think he doesn't have good technique against the run, and that's something they're going to have to work on. But it's not priority number 1, 2, or 3 with a cornerback. So I really like the player. I still think they're going to trade up out of 22 and get an offensive tackle. But if I'm staying at 22, Nate Wiggins is my guy.
What do you guys think about Rube's selection? Go ahead, Barrett. We broke him down on Birds Huddle earlier this week. I was upset that they might pick another guy who doesn't want any thigh pads, knee pads, or hip pads. But what do you guys think about Rube's choice with Wiggins?
That's what I'm saying. I can remember playing, I pulled around the corner. We ran 19 bobs. So I pull around the corner, and I'm going to block the widest man. It just so happened we're playing Dallas, and the widest man was Dion. And just like Wiggins, he ran a 4.2 something also. And Wiggins ran a 4.28. So we're talking about elite speed. So I pull around the corner on Dion, and going towards Dion runs out of bounds. So I'm like, what's going on? He turns around and tells me, look, they pay me to cover, big guy. Next time you pull around the corner, just point and I'll go. You ain't got to worry about me coming up and wrestling with you. So the same thing with Wiggins. He's not worried about that. He's going to go out there and be a cover guy. That's what we're going to pay him for. I believe in his skill set. He can play off the ball and zone. He can play man-to-man, elite, speed. That's one thing you can't coach is speed like that. You're right, man. He can come in and be a plug-and-play guy at the cornerback position.
Yeah, I like the player. I like how sticky he is in coverage. I do think it kind of invites that problem of, if he's not going to give you anything against the run. I still think the value kind of lines up at 22. You're looking at like who's left on the board. I think Mims, like Rube mentioned, is a solid pick there, even though he probably isn't going to play right away. He probably isn't ready to play right away. I think Cooper DeJean is a name, if you're looking at corners, who makes a lot of sense. I might have him ahead of Wiggins in the pecking order. I think he's a more versatile player. But like, I understand the Wiggins pick. I don't know. It's really a huge difference between Wiggins and Cooper DeJean. So it's a fun thought process to like, which kind of player do they want? Like, which traits do they value more than the others? Because pure cover, like, yeah, Nate Wiggins is the better pure cover corner, whereas Cooper DeJean offers you position versatility. He's going to be able to give you more in the run. He's going to be able to, he can play just about anywhere on the field, whereas Nate Wiggins is you plug him in outside and you hope he's CB1 in 2 years. So it really depends on whatever you want there. If Wiggins lives up to his potential, yeah, absolutely. If he becomes Dion, yeah, you take that all day. I have some doubts about just how high the ceiling is.
Yeah, and Dave, you mentioned Cooper DeJean. I'm surprised Barrett didn't, pound the table when Rube didn't take him. Barrett's been very high on Cooper DeJean. More of a Swiss Army knife, a guy who can do a lot of different things, can play the slot, could maybe play safety. Maybe that skill set's a little redundant with Sidney Brown, who's a guy, even though he's coming off injury, that they really like. But I think I would go Cooper DeJean there. I do like Wiggins. I also think, if you're looking at corner, Kool-Aid McKinstry possibly still in the mix there. Probably more of a high floor, low ceiling than Wiggins. Like Wiggins could be an elite guy if that speed translates and you can, protect him against the run. Whereas Kool-Aid just seems, despite the name, kind of like a steady guy, can cover. But I do like the pick in Wiggins. And I do agree with Rube that I think their ideal scenario would be to trade up a couple spots and take a tackle with guard versatility. The guys you mentioned, like Amarius Mims or a Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma, those guys are pretty much strictly right tackles that can't kick inside. I would hate to draft a guy at 22 that's not going to play for 2 years. I know Howie's kind of intimated and his history has shown that he's very willing to do that. But I think, where their window is right now, I don't know that I'd be as willing to take a tackle in this spot who can't kick into guard for a couple years first.
Back to the land of 10,000 lakes at number 23, Barrett Brooks. The Minnesota Vikings are picking here. What do you think they do?
I think they bolster up the interior of that defensive line and go out and get a really, really good defensive tackle from Texas. Byron Murphy, the second defensive tackle from Texas. We're talking about a guy with great size, 6 foot, 300 pounds. Very quick and explosive, gets up the field. But, when you look at him and how he plays, is he a product from the defensive guys around him? I mean, he had one guy on the other side of him who plays at the 1 technique. He's at the 3 technique. And T'Vondre Sweat, who's 6'4", 366 pounds. And when you got an immovable object in the middle of that defense, you got to focus on that guy, which led Murphy to a lot of one-on-one blocks, and he took advantage of that, and he had a great season this year, all Big 12. I saw him going against Cooper Beebe, and, it was a battle, clash of the Titans, but I think he got the upper hand on Cooper. He's my Kansas State guy. He got the upper hand on him this year, which allowed them to beat Kansas State in the final seconds. He was one of the guys who sped up the quarterback and made a play. So, yes, he's the guy to come in and really make a difference in the middle of their defense. He's going to be a good player, but I'm still kind of wondering, he's worth getting that pick right there, but I'm still kind of wondering, is he a product of the defense or is he just that explosive as a player at that 3 technique position?
Back in the NFC East with the Dallas Cowboys on the clock at number 24, Mr. Mulhern, where did they go?
Well, they pretty much sat out free agency, so they've got to start addressing needs at some point.
Right.
And it looks like the draft's going to have to be it. I am going with Jackson Powers Johnson, interior offensive lineman from Oregon. He's a massive dude, 6'3", 328 pounds, was a first-team All-American last year, won the Remington Award as the best center in the country. The Cowboys have really struggled to fill that center spot since Travis Frederick retired. He was only 28, 29 years old, stepped away for medical reasons prior to the 2020 season, and they've really missed him a lot. The Cowboys really have drafted extremely well, especially, of late. You got CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, Trayvon Diggs, very good. Yeah, Vander Esch, who just retired, another guy who had to step away from the game. But they've drafted really well, and they just haven't done a good job of paying the talent when they need to. You look at the difference between the Eagles locking guys up early, Jeffrey Lurie shelling out money early. Jerry's waiting on CeeDee Lamb. They probably could have signed him last year. They knew he's a good player. They wait. Now it's probably going to cost them in excess of $30 million. So, the way they've been operating is kind of strange. They're not signing anybody, but if they can get someone who can really anchor that offensive line and protect Dak Prescott, who's got a cap hit of like $60 million this year, so they better protect him. They got some problems there in Dallas. Haven't really signed anybody, but they address a big need here with Jackson Powers Johnson.
In week 1, the Eagles will be in Brazil on Friday, and Dave Zangaro will be there. So it's appropriate that you're taking their selection here. The Packers pick 25th. What did they do here, Dave?
They have to go in the trenches, and it's another offensive tackle. There's a theme of the first round of this draft. It's offense and really offensive tackles. A lot of them are going to go. I have them taking Amarius Mims, the offensive tackle from Georgia. Really raw, just 8 college starts. That's the knock against him. The plus side here is that he could be great. We just don't know it yet, but he has all the intangibles. 6'7", 340, moves incredibly well, shows some toughness coming back from that tightrope ankle surgery. And the Packers need help on their offensive line. David Bakhtiari is gone. John Runyon Jr. left in free agency. So they might have some spots open. There's been talk in Green Bay about moving Zach Tom from right tackle inside to center. Now, maybe Amarius Mims isn't ready to play from day one, but if that's an option, I think you have to explore it a little bit. And he did play right tackle at Georgia. So I think this is a really good fit for a team that needs as much help as they can get on the offensive line to protect their young quarterback, Jordan Love.
Rube, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat the Eagles in the wild card round. They signed Baker Mayfield to a big contract. How did they bolster their team here with its 26th pick?
Yeah, we're on a run of cornerbacks. Thanks to me. I keep drafting them here. Dave did a really good job a couple of minutes ago running down Cooper DeJean's strengths. And to compare him to Nate Wiggins, he's 20 pounds heavier and 1 inch shorter. So that just tells you the difference in the players. Nate Wiggins is a tall, lanky, rangy guy with tremendous speed. Cooper DeJean, it has great positional versatility. He can play inside, he can play outside. I don't see any reason he can't play safety, as Dave alluded to. He's going to maybe not have the ceiling as Nate Wiggins, but he's a really solid. He's probably a safer pick, and certainly a guy that I wouldn't be stunned if the Eagles, figure it. I mean, if he's drifting down, I could see them, making a run at him at some point. But I really like the player, and I think he's a safer bet than Nate Wiggins. He is going to give you more against the run than Wiggins. There's really no weaknesses in his game. He's just a really solid guy. Iowa D-backs are always really fundamentally sound. They always have a ton of defensive backs drafted. Sean Constantine, Damian Robinson are a couple that the Eagles have taken over the years. But for Tampa, I like Cooper DeJean. I think there's a pretty big range of where I think he could go. But if he's there at 26 where Tampa picks, I'd be surprised if he gets past them.
We're back in the desert for pick number 27, Barrett. The Arizona Cardinals are on the clock. What do you say?
I think I'm going to go with defense again, and I'm going to go with another cornerback. In fact, I'm going to get the guy that was opposite of Terrion Arnold, cornerback from Alabama. I'm going to go with Kool-Aid McKinstry. Kool-Aid is one of those players that has a high football IQ as far as being a cornerback, understands the game. He's a tight press man corner, can come up in your face and reroute you. He's also one of those guys that rarely gets beat by the double move. He's very patient on how he plays the game and really understands what teams are trying to do to him as far as, if they're trying to run slants on him or they're trying to run double moves on him. He researches, watches a lot of film, and gets a leg up on it so he can go out there and guess a little bit and not be hurt. I like his athleticism. He has fluid hips. He's one of the few corners in this draft that you can go out and just leave him out there by himself, and he'll be just fine, covering your best receiver. He's that type of cornerback. Plus, he has the best name, in this draft, Kool-Aid. Oh, yeah, he's that guy. So they're gonna need some cornerbacks out there, and the Cardinals defense is lacking that right now. So he can come in and play instantly for him. So I like Kool-Aid McKinstry as far as being a guy to come in and really vie for a starting position at the wide corner.
I see you laughing there, Dave.
Well, you know what? Earlier, Moles said Kool-Aid might not be the calm pick. Like it might not fit his name, but Kool-Aid's always there for you, right? Like you go on the street, there's Kool-Aid there. It's comforting, and that's Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Right. I like the comparison there. And let's move to The Buffalo Bills are on the clock. Speaking of Mr. Mulhern, number 28 overall. What do you think they do with that?
Well, they created a massive hole in their offense when they traded Stephon Diggs to the Texans. I think they have to address that right here. So I'm going with A.D. Mitchell, wide receiver from Texas. I love this kid. I think he should go higher than this, honestly. I think he's going to end up being one of the top 2 or 3 best receivers in this class. He's 6'2", 205, ran like a 4.35 in the 40. Kind of played 1B to the 1A that was Xavier Worthy, the true speedster at Texas. But I think this kid's going to be a stud. Gives me a little bit of CeeDee Lamb vibes with some of his route running. Not as polished, but, bigger than CD and is really like a true X outside receiver where Lamb plays more inside. They certainly have a need for a big play guy now that not only did they lose Stephon Diggs, they also lost Gabe Davis in free agency. So if you pair this kid with Josh Allen, I think he can be a special player up in Buffalo. So give me A.D. Mitchell here for the Buffalo Bills.
It is the Detroit Lions at number 29, Dave, and an interesting choice here. What do you think they do?
Yeah, my last pick. I'm going to get a little choked up here. Going with Darius Robinson. I'm going to call him a defensive lineman from Missouri because you can put him in the edge category. You can call him a defensive tackle. He's kind of one of those tweeners. He can play pretty much any spot up front. So it takes a little bit of understanding from the coaching staff of how they exactly want to use him. To me, Aaron Glenn is the type of defensive coordinator who will have a plan for Darius Robinson. We've seen him use some of his defensive linemen in a similar way. He's 6'5", 285. And like I mentioned, he can really play anywhere from the 3 to the 9. Like he can play on that line pretty much anywhere. A really valuable player. Kind of reminds me a little bit of kind of what we see from Milton Williams with the Eagles. Just a really versatile player, can play inside and out. And I think he'd be a really nice addition to a team that wants to compete this year.
Here picking at the bottom of the draft, and of course some of these are the marquee teams in the league, and Baltimore Ravens no exception. What do they do here at number 30?
Yeah, I think the Ravens are in a position where they're just going to take the best guy available at 30. Tyler Guyton's an interesting guy. Started at TCU, finished at Oklahoma. He's another guy who, he hasn't played a ton. He's played more than Mims, but he started a handful of games at TCU, and he started about a year and a half at Oklahoma. I think he's a long way from being where he can be, and I think if there's a team out there that sees that potential, I could see him going well higher than 30, because he's got some work to do. He's got to get stronger. He's got to get bigger. But technique-wise, as a pass blocker, he's already there. So he's got to work on his strength. He's got to work on his size, put on some weight, and get some better technique. But as a pass blocker, he's already pro ready. So I think he's a guy that can really continue to ascend and keep getting better. And in a couple of years, you might be really glad you took him at 30. And the Ravens have the luxury of doing that because of the roster that they've built down there. So at number 30, Ravens, I'm going to O-tackle from Oklahoma, Tyler Guyton.
2 picks left. San Francisco 49ers on the clock at 31, Barrett. What do the Niners do?
Well, I think the Niners go cornerback this year. They probably the weakest point in their defense were their cornerbacks. So I think they go and get a guy who has probably the best name for a cornerback. TJ Tampa.
What about Kool-Aid McKinstry?
Well, I'm talking about as far as a cornerback. He has the best overall name.
That's fair.
Yeah. But Tampa, as in Tampa 2, TJ Tampa, Florida kid, really, really good player. I mean, he can I love his back pedal. He can play press man, but it's not really press man when he plays it. He's almost playing a mirror concept. So he's usually, running step for step with a guy, and his bailout is really well, flips his hips. Very versatile player. I actually called a game for Iowa State this year, and he really surprised me on how fluid he was out on the field. He's one of those guys that if you want to put him in the best position, matchup zone would probably be the best way for him to go out there and really excel at the cornerback position, because that way he can come back zone concept. When somebody comes into his zone, he sticks to him like flypaper. He's that good of an athlete, and he can, turn and run with guys, reroute guys from zone concepts. So, yeah, he's going to be surprising how good he is in the NFL. He's NFL ready right now, the scheme that he has, and, his ability to go out there and really be a versatile cornerback in the slot or outside gives him a leg up on a lot of cornerbacks in this draft. So he can play both positions in the slot and on the outside.
Super Bowl champs picking at number 32. Please do us the honor, Mr. Mulhern, wrap up this first round with who you think they'll pick.
Well, speaking of great names, I am going with best player available here in my estimation, which the Chiefs can obviously do. They go Chop Robinson, edge rusher from Penn State. They have need at tackle, but I feel like there's a drop-off after Mims and Guyton to the next group of guys, so I don't think they go there. With the Rashee Rice drag racing incident, who knows what his situation's going to be. They could maybe go receiver here. You've got Xavier Worthy or Ladd McConkey, probably the next two guys on the board. But I'm going with Chop Robinson, was a third-team All-American at Penn State. Physical guy, but really just quick off the ball. That's really where his bread is buttered. Was a third-team All-American. Didn't have a ton of sack production, though. Only 4 sacks. So you worry, is that actually going to translate? A lot of times it doesn't. If they don't get to the quarterback in college, they're not going to get there in the NFL. So that would be a concern for me. But when in doubt, Andy generally goes to the trenches. And I kind of like pairing him with George Karlaftis on the other side, who's really kind of a hard-nosed, effort guy, who's obviously a very good player already, 2-time Super Bowl champion in 2 seasons. You kind of just go with the speed guy on the opposite side. So I go Chop Robinson here to round out round 1 for the Kansas City Chiefs.
32 picks in the book. Great job, gentlemen. Curious where you think there was value here in the first round and what you thought about some of the runs that were made, cornerback, quarterback, et cetera.
Yeah, I think the one thing that stands out to me is just how much offense came off the board.
Right.
And I think that
Absolutely.
is going to be what happens on draft night as well. This is a draft where we're going to see maybe 19, 20, 21 offensive players in the first round. I think we kind of hit that on the head. I wouldn't be surprised if it skews even more offense than what we did when it actually happens.
Now, I'm really interested in seeing how the corners line up because, other than those top 2, Mitchell and Arnold, there's just no consensus really of anything. So I'm curious to see how that all falls. I think the order that we picked them is valid, but I have a hunch that Thursday night it might come up a little different. We'll see.
And, I think it fell into form what teams do. The tackle position on the offensive side of the ball has always been the moneymaker positions. Tackles come at a premium, and people are willing to pick them in the first round. So when you look at the amount of tackles and the tackle run that went in the first round, it just goes to show that when you lock up guys on the outside, protecting those $1 million quarterbacks, you got to have somebody protecting their backside and front side. So teams are willing to draft pretty high for offensive linemen, especially at the tackle position this year and previous years.
And the thing I'll be monitoring come Thursday, I think there's kind of the 2 elite corners in Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold, and then 2 or 3 tackle/guard guys like Fautanu and J.C. Latham. I think that's what Howie Roseman's going to be watching. When do those 4 guys come off the board? How high up does he have to go? Because I think those are kind of the 4 guys that are really at areas of need and players they certainly will be targeting come next Thursday.
We are about a week away from day 1 of the draft. So much fun and excitement. Dreams will come true, and we will be there every step of the way here on NBC Sports Philadelphia.com. We appreciate the expertise and insight of our insiders, Dave Zangaro and Reuben Frank from the Eagle Eye Podcast. Make sure to check out their work on NBC Sports Philadelphia.com. Catch Barrett Brooks every weeknight on Birds Huddle, as well as Eagles pre- and post-game live. And Mike Mulhern, he has a cot. He sleeps at the office. He's always there, and we appreciate you being the expert that you are, Mulhern, as well. So this has been On the Clock, our Eagles first round mock draft. Thank you for watching and listening. For Danny Pommells and all the guests, we'll see you next time.